because otherwise it wouldn't be. And so, fundamentally, there is underneath all the appearances of this world, all the forms that continuously arise, come and go, all the so-called many moments, there is another dimension without which none of this could even be. And that is, we need to be very careful now because we are using words, and every word that we use belongs to the realm of object consciousness. But we are speaking now of the space that enables this world to be. Let's call it, just for a moment, the inner space. All the experiences in your life, all the things that happen in your life have happened, the so-called past. All the things that happened in a space, otherwise they couldn't have happened. Or in a light, you can call it a light. And that is the space that you essentially are, underneath the continuous movement of objects of consciousness. There's the objects of consciousness, and there is that which underlies all that, which is a simple space consciousness, which is not anything, it is not something that you could say, I've got it now. Because the moment you say, there it is, it's not it. The moment you say, now I know myself, no, you can't. You can only know things about yourself, in other words, all the objects in your consciousness, all your conditioning that you can know. And it's interesting, maybe it's even fascinating. I am so interesting. My story is so fascinating. You can talk for a long time, and some people have had fascinating lives. This is true. But their fascinating lives, in a few years, will pop like a soap bubble. And they're popping all over. Pop, 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 pop. Oh, that was so fascinating. And then what's left is, because we are talking about form, it has its place, but it is only a tiny aspect of who you are, because the end of all the forms and all the, whether it's your life is fascinating or dreadful mess, it all ends up, as I said before, somewhere as the dash between your date of birth and date of death on your gravestone. That is your life on the level of form. Whether it's been fascinating or dreadful misery, it all comes to the same thing, a 2-inch dash. Or if you made it in this world, then you buy a huge one, and then the dash is 5 inches. Now, to the ego, because the ego knows nothing but form, this is extremely depressing. And if you were sitting here as the ego, you would only the ego, you would say, I don't want to hear any more of this. This is so depressing. I want whatever it is the ego wants. It wants many things. That a life that knows only object consciousness, a human life that is confined to just the play of object consciousness, is, no matter, even if it's rich in events or achievements, it is impoverished. And in fact, true achievements as a creative act is not even possible if your life is consumed only by object consciousness. Because any true realization, any original, even thought, most thinking is conditioned thinking, it's repetitive, it's old. Anything that is fresh, new, empowered, anything that is beautiful, a beautiful creation or deep realization does not come out of the accumulated object consciousness. It comes out of the space that is underneath that, the space of awareness, the space of consciousness without an object. And you find it by directing attention away from the world of object consciousness, which ultimately is thoughts, sense perceptions, even sense perceptions become translated into thought. Direct attention away. Now, where do you direct attention? You cannot make space consciousness into an object of attention. Because if you make space consciousness into an object of attention, you have more object consciousness. And that is why Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven does not come with signs to be observed. You can't say, ah, I've got it. There it is, object, space consciousness, I have it now. I have achieved space consciousness. So it cannot become an object of your attention because it is attention. So when you look at something, let's say you can try this out when you're a moment in nature or anywhere in your room or here. If you look at something for the first moment, a tree, a flower, an animal, whatever it may be, you look at something, your gaze falls upon it, and there's, let's say it's a beautiful flower. And if you now need to be very vigilant and observe yourself. The moment you look at that flower and you truly see the beauty and something within your response, there is a space before the mind comes in with labels. And that is the space of space consciousness in which the flower appears. It is the light of consciousness in which the flower appears. So you have, we can do the same about this room. We know all the things that we can perceive in this room or about ourselves. All these objects that arise in consciousness at this moment, these objects are arising in consciousness. Oh yes, interesting. Is it possible to be aware of another dimension that underlies all these objects that arise in consciousness? Is it possible to be aware of yourself as the space in which the various continuously changing objects arise? Is it possible to sense the presence that you are as that which underlies all the things that have form, that arise as form, and arise and subside, come and go, come and go. And you are, at this moment, you are the space for this. For this room, you are the space for this voice, you are the space for whatever you experience. In your mind, whatever thoughts, you're the space even for the thought. If the thought does not absorb your attention completely, you can be the space for the thought. The moment, for example, you realize, there goes a thought, I'm verbalizing it now, but when you realize it, there's no verbalizing, there's simply the awareness that there is a thought. An old thought, perhaps, or a thought that says, this should be, this should not be, why don't they, and so on and so on. Another one of those thoughts. And the awareness is there, just, oh. And the awareness sees the thought come and go. Or an emotion, an upset. This shouldn't be, okay, so you feel, okay, and suddenly there's an awareness that is aware of this form that arises. That is you. That is space. And that is, in essence, the now. That is the deeper meaning of now. Because now is not what happens, now is the space for it. Now is the space of consciousness, let's say, but consciousness is just a word, so it's just a pointer. You can only understand it and knowing at this moment by sensing within and sensing yourself as the underlying presence for whatever you perceive or think or feel. You are the presence or the space for that. And when I put this into language, when I say you sense yourself as the underlying space, we've already gone wrong, because language has a structure which requires a subject and an object. So when we put this into language, I say you sense your very self, it looks as if you had made yourself into an object. I feel myself. But that's only due to the structure of language. In this realization, you realize yourself as the eternal subject for whatever happens. And this eternal subject is not anything that can be defined in form, anything that can be defined through language or through thought, or through any opinion which is thought. Your essential self is totally beyond anything that you could say about it, or put words or thoughts to, or labels. It cannot be defined. It can only be known not as an object, but known as the subject. So all these words are continuously pointing to this realization of yourself as the underlying presence in which the world and all the things that come and go appear. So a very, perhaps the most direct way of not just knowing or sensing that when you sit here and say, yes, and again, you can never grasp it, you cannot grasp it, because you are it. So you cannot grasp yourself. You are it. Now, how can I know this in my daily life is the question. What do I do in my daily life which one object after another arises and demands my attention? Every object and every thought that comes, this is important, deal with me now, give me attention, pulls you in, the phone rings, the computer, the emails, you haven't answered my email. Okay, then the next thing. And he wants that, and she wants that, and one thing after another, it pulls in your attention. You lose yourself in the world which is the world of form, which includes your mind. Lost in your mind, lost in the world, completely ignorant of who you are in essence. And that is impoverished, a life that is impoverished, not knowing that. But there are, of course, spiritual seekers who have been seeking to know that dimension for many years. The mistake that they make if they're still spiritual seekers, first of all,